So, Hass, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. It's Friday at the point of recording this of Mental Health Awareness Week. And we know that the topic for this week was kindness. It was actually originally sleep, but they changed it to kindness, right? So I'm going to start today by asking you a question about kindness.
Okay.
Have you ever been unkind?
Oh man,
Didn't see that coming, did you?
What a banging start.
Yeah. And by the way,
Yeah.
when you answer yes, because I know you will,
Yeah.
I want you to give me an example of when you've been unkind.
Okay. All right. This is going to be a bit of dead air while I think, but okay. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Of course, I've been unkind.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't think about it too much. It can be anything. It can be small. It can be big. I want to know an example of when you did it, because I want to ask you something about it.
Well, usually when we play fantasy football, Josh, and you're having a week run of performance, that's when I tend to really amp up my unkindness towards you, bring you down. It actually makes me feel really good about life when I can bring you down when you haven't been performing well on the fantasy football.
Yeah,
That's when I'm unkind.
Okay.
So
that's an example when you're just unkind, just to be a knob,
unkind,
right? Just for the reason to be unkind, right? So you've given me the worst possible example for where I want to take this.
Okay, okay, I've got an answer for you.
All right.
And this is quite an honest answer.
Good. That's what I want.
I'm more unkind internally than I'm externally.
Okay.
So I think unkind things more than I say unkind things.
Yeah.
You get it? So like I might judge someone. Yeah. I might judge someone for their appearance or what they're saying. I may not have all the full facts. And I'll jump to a conclusion. But then I'll probably realize that it's not a very nice thing, or it might be unkind. So I won't verbalize it always, but most of it might happen internally than it happens externally. I can't really think of anything specifically because most of the time I'm a kind.
Externally you're kind, but internally you're a judgmental, horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Just no one gets to see it.
Just no one gets to see it.
I think that's pretty normal. I think people do that quite a lot.
So when that happens, we haven't got a specific example here, right? And I don't really know where I'm going to go with this, but I'm going to run with it anyway. When you are being unkind to somebody internally, so let's say you've just judged somebody, right, quite harshly internally, and you haven't come out of it externally. Why do you do that? Why are you unkind about them in your mind?
I'm spotting the differences maybe between us.
Yeah.
I am also maybe thinking about choices they've made, whatever, I mean, it's hard to kind of really pinpoint it down, but I think it's probably related to things within my nurture that I've been raised with, values, systems, that sort of stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it's probably a combination of things, I would say.
So that's kind of like the process, right, behind how you get there. But why does that result in you being unkind? Why when somebody does something differently to you, what part of yourself brings that unkindness? And I am pushing you here purposely, by the way.
Okay. What
you look at someone and you think, well, he's such a knob when he does that whatever it is.
Inevitably, it points to something about how you feel about yourself.
Right.
So actually, I might look at like somebody who's really ripped on Love Island and think, oh, that guy's a total brainless moron. But I'm probably going, oh, but he's put the effort into to look as good as he does, and I don't look like that. So I'm just going to pick on him for being a brainless moron. Or her.
Right. Okay, yeah, right. So that's quite a good example, right? So, and it shows that when you make that judgment of him, right, it's something to do with yourself. Now, to make a judgment of somebody on Love Island who's got a ripped body, right, is harsh on your part, right? Arguably, right? But you're not a bad person, right?
Mm.
So the point that I was trying to sort of lean towards on here is a point that I've kind of made when we look at kindness this week, right? We do this thing where we go kindness, being unkind is a really bad thing. So then we just flat right go about calling everyone out that's unkind, right? Now I know for me, if I think of the times when I'm unkind, yeah, to somebody, in the same way that you are maybe judgmental or I'm not very nice to somebody, it's normally when I'm not in a very good place for whatever reason. I'm likely to be more unkind if I'm struggling internally with something. So you've spoken before actually on the podcast a little bit about what you like your weight when you were younger, that you're in a process at the moment of doing the rower and stuff like that. So it's interesting that the first thing that comes into your head is somebody that's ripped on Love Island, right? So that's a reaction to that part of you. And so what I'm trying to say is, if we want to help create a culture of kindness, simply just calling people out for being unkind and shaming them for it is not going to help the situation. And so we start to recognize that unkindness in that sense, right, could be a sign of an emotional struggle.
Yeah.
You see where I've gone with that?
Yeah. And it's not always true, though, is it? Like there are nasty people who are just unkind.
Of
Like
course.
I guess the point is we always have to recognize that between me and you, we will always look to deeper rationale as to why something, what the cause and effect is, right? Because
Yeah.
you've done a lot of work in it, you've been through it, we've talked a lot about cause and effect, and actually we talked about it when we talked about bullying, actually, that it will oftentimes point to something going on in that bully's home. But we also quickly said that actually there are dicks as well, and there are unkind people. There are people that just genuinely just don't have kindness in their wiring, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of calling people out for being unkind, the opposite of that is it feels a little bit like it feels a bit awkward when you're calling people out for being kind or you're recognizing kindness. It's almost like you feel like ashamed or embarrassed to say, oh, this person's been really kind or they've been generous or whatever. So it's like, where do you find the middle ground?
Yeah, well, exactly. And often, and this is like, one of the things about what we try and do in this podcast, right, is tackle that gray area in between, right? And when we start to realize that sometimes unkindness might be a reaction to an internal struggle, that also doesn't justify it. So if you were horrible to someone with abs, to use that example, I wouldn't say, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it. It's just because you're emotionally struggling. It would still be reprimandable, right? And we would have to make sure that, we show that you can't be like that. And we can do that with compassion and think, well, hang on a minute. Why is somebody being unkind in this way? But I think we do that flat right. There's like the call out and shaming culture at the moment where there's a lot of like virtue signaling as well. So sometimes when you think about the people online, for example, it's the whole be kind thing that came out of what happened tragically to Caroline Flack. So many of those people that are saying be kind are the same people that are on social media, like calling other people out and shaming them in certain ways. And I think sometimes that can even be dressed up in like multiple of layers. When you see them real passive messages online where people, and I think you're being horrible and you're trying to sort of dress it up as if you're trying to help somebody, but you're just flat right being not very nice. And so it is everywhere. And I think we have to understand that we all have the ability to kind of move through that sort of range of reactions and emotions. And I guess in a way, it kind of brings it back to what you said at the beginning, which is like, you can be a lot more unkind internally than you are externally, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I think the reason I mentioned that, I wasn't trying to dodge it. I try not to, I try not to operate that way in life anyway. But you also have, you have a filtration process where you can check yourself. So you might think something unkind, but actually the internal process that stops you from verbalizing it, right? And so, and it's the uncontrollable part, the intuition that comes in, or the connectivity. So, whatever you might like, look at somebody or make a judgment about a situation or whatever it might be. But you stop yourself. So that's an important, powerful tool, to stop you from being, unkind in person.
Yeah,
I am not going to stop being unkind to you when fantasy football comes back up. And
no, but that's understandable because you've been losing for a long time on it. So
that's not necessarily true.
It would make perfect sense.
Doing fake news here. Fake news, as your best mate Donald Trump says. Because we all know you're a big Donald Trump supporter, as you've said a couple of times on this podcast.
Can we just clear this up, by the way?
Nothing to clear up, mate.
I hate Donald Trump,
mate. You need to go back through the archives and see how much you think he's... You actually said you'd like to live with him in, I think, episode 3.
No, it's interesting that you would, when we start talking about fantasy football, you would try and make me look like some sort of Donald Trump supporter, especially with, how often you've had to talk to my back throughout the season, because I've been so far ahead.
Not that frequently. But anyway, we're going off topic. Mental Health Awareness Week. It's a big week for you, right?
Yeah, it's a busy week and a big week, and I really like it. I'm a big fan of it. As somebody who works in that space, I really understand and recognize the importance of it. And you actually see a lot of people that work in the space in the way that I do that get a bit funny about it during the week. You'll see them sort of posting saying, I do this all year. And I've seen some people sometimes say, I'm not going to post about it during this week because I do it all year. But as big as it's got, and it has got big because everybody talks about it when it happens, it's easy to get a little bit sort of narky about that. But I also am the ambassador for NACOA, which you obviously know. And we do COA week in February. And this has changed slightly now over the last few years. But when I first started campaigning with NACOA 4 or 5 years ago, the only time anyone anywhere would ever listen to anything we've got to say, particularly in the press and things like that, was during COA week. Mm-hmm. And so that week, our whole year revolved around that. And it was trying to keep the momentum after COA week and build the momentum in the run up to COA week, right? And it's still a little bit like that in that space. So the fact that it's not really like that for mental health anymore shows how far we've come. Does that make sense? And you can't never really lose sight of that. How do you find it? As somebody who doesn't work in the space, I guess because I probably live in an echo chamber in terms of what I see online, because so many of the people I interact with are kind of in that space. Does your online interaction change? Do you see it change drastically for Mental Health Awareness Week? And how does it make you feel when it does?
I mean, I don't necessarily change my behaviors that much, I mean, I'll reference it with people that I know are deeply connected to it. I'll ask how it's going. But I guess what I get frustrated with is organizations that genuinely don't talk about it for 51 weeks of the year. And then suddenly it's a thing and it's big. And I think I haven't got an issue with, raising the awareness. It's important. You use the week where all the eyes are on it, right? That's just smart marketing, right? But in terms of what you're trying to achieve with the week. But what I have a real problem with is organizations who just jump in on the bandwagon, do some stuff, and then never say it again. And I think that is the challenge with a lot of topical moments or things, you know, or important things. Yeah. So there are people, you know, let's take, you know, Black History Month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots and lots and lots of people jump in, lots and lots of organizations jump in, and then where's the rest? Where's the conversation for the rest of the year?
Yeah.
And how do you connect back what you're saying during the run up to that month, during that month, with what's going on in the world? And where's your perspective if you're a big corporation and you're doing some stuff around it? Where's your perspective when what's happening in the world, such as, you know, brutality by kind of police, or, you know, people that, you know, are just going out for a jog and they don't make it home? Like, where's the connection? You
Yeah.
know, so that's the thing I have a problem with, weeks or days. You know, like when I think we've talked before about, it's really important to have the day, but I think the more important one is the whatever, insert whatever in commas, day plus one,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because
Yeah.
everyone moves on.
Yeah.
So
Because
what happens on mental health week, awareness week, on the Monday after it?
yeah.
What's your plan?
Yeah. And I guess what
What's your plan, John? Josh.
John.
John. Josh.
uh,
What's your plan for next week?
well, look, next week I'm just flat out busy back to back every day. So Monday, my plan next week is to do nothing because it's bank holiday. But I don't know. I guess in a way it's slightly different for me because I am doing it all year. So next week for me is the same as last week was for me, right? And really, I haven't changed my behavior this week for Mental Health Awareness Week. So I think the question is probably bigger to organizations that feel like they've nodded towards it this week. What are you doing next week? Yeah. What are you really doing? What are you really doing about mental health? Are you just giving a nod to it this week? But on the flip side of that, as somebody that works in the space, it's my duty if I go into an organization to try and change that, to try and create an experience that lasts beyond this week. And there is a flip side again to what you've said as well, right? And we have, like, I'll always try and ask, why might somebody do that? Why might, you know, the CEO of a big company only be interested in mental health awareness during Mental Health Awareness Week? And if I ran a company that was being really successful and everything was going well, and one of the people team come to me and said, we need to do a lot more around mental health and well-being, I might say, if I've never struggled massively internally, and I know everyone has to some degree, but if I've never struggled in a way that's made me need to feel that I need to do anything about it, right? If you came to me as part of the people team and said, we need to do more about mental health, I might say, okay, why? And you say, well, it's good for the people, you know, make them work better. And I say, yeah, but look how well we're doing. Everybody's working amazingly. And then I say, so why do you want money off me to do that? So I'm not suggesting that that's right, but I'm throwing it out there as something that, you know, that's what we need to address. And so that's some of the things when I do work with people teams, by the way, in organizations that I try and address. They will say to me, you know, it's difficult to get the powers that be to do something about this.
So obviously I've run HR departments, you
Yeah.
know, before. So I sort of understand the context of it, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. If things are going well and actually, and the leader of that organization is not somebody that's, you know, that's had a struggle or understanding. So why would you invest it? Well, firstly, you know, I think it's really important to evolve these conversations away from the people team, and where the people team are seen to be going cap in hand. It's not a money equation. It's about you know, it's about moving the organization forward. So you work with lots of successful organizations, right? If you
Yeah.
look at certain criteria, like they are, you know, manufacturing, global service businesses, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you know that the external vision that people might have of those organizations is not matched by what's going on internally.
Yeah.
And so actually, you know, if you run an organization that is successful, there are going to be pressure points. And
Mm.
where there are pressure points, there's going to be situations where people are being under pressure.
Yeah.
And so I think there should be really good CEOs look at all the data. They don't
Yeah.
just go by what their gut feeling is.
Yeah.
One of the things you have to learn, I'd had to learn when I was in HR, was, you know, my personal tastes around creating a learning and development program. It couldn't like just feed the way that it needed to be for that organization. It
Mm.
had, you know, you have to do what's right for the organization. And you know, I was listening to another podcast, and it was like a venture capitalist person.
Mm.
You know, they invest in companies, and they said one of the first rules you have to learn is you can't just make decisions on whether you like the product or not, whether you would use the product or not, because you have to kind of get rid of that bias
Yeah.
and look at the wider picture, look at the data. So that's why I think it's important that you have to look at everything, all the impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at things. You once showed me that the view of the thing coming above all of the trees so that you can see everything, right? And
Perspectives, yeah.
yeah, and one of the things that I've done with like some of the organizations that I work with, so the reason I bring that up is because sometimes these people will come to me and they'll say, um, they'll explain that the issue that they've got, like, we're really keen to do something, but it's just trying to get the budget and making people see the value in this and how important it is. And it'd be very easy to sort of in the position that I'm in, be like, well, if you don't value it, right? If they don't value it, then they can't have it. But sometimes what I do with organizations is say, well, I remember one particular, and I won't name them, but I was working with them and some of their apprentices, and I was doing some of the resilience stuff that I did. And I remember a couple of them actually, but one of the apprentices shared this amazing story, right? Backstory of their life. And they talked about how working for this organization felt like a massive opportunity for them, right? And part of their apprenticeship scheme thing that they were doing is they were going to like maybe like create an app or do an event or do something like that, right? As a way of sort of integrating them to within the culture. And I'm talking broadly here to make sure that I don't give anything away. And so I spoke to the people there and I said, look, if you were to try and do an event here that you could get some of the higher up people to come along to, if they saw some of these people talk as passionately as they just have about the opportunity they've got, while in the same instance talking about some of the things that they are experiencing and dealing with away from their working life, you'll be hard pushed to have these people at the top sit there and look to that and not think, you know what, I want to do what I can to make sure that I support this thing. Yeah. So sometimes it is about creating, to bring it back to what we were talking about in the awareness weeks, right? And going forward, sometimes it is about creating that experience in somebody, right? Creating that shift internally so that they can see the bigger picture. Yeah. And so that they can do what you just spoke about and become much more aware of all of the data, right? Because what's the saying? Not everything of value can be measured, and not everything that can be measured is of value, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So you make it very human. Does that make sense what I've said
Yeah,
there?
and also, you know, look, if the world is pointing to it, if actually you have a light bulb moment as a result of something that you see as you know, then it's good. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
There's
mean,
the
I guess
power.
I'm not challenging the week. I think the week is brilliant and the effort that goes into it. I'm challenging going back to normal, you know, on the
Yeah.
Sunday night. So I want to just ask you something actually that
Yeah.
it just popped into my head. It's a different topic. I was talking to a mate yesterday, and we're just having a catch up, and I was talking about on our recent podcast where I was just, you know, where a friend called out that we always just sort of say, yeah, everything's okay, and
Yeah.
we tried a different approach, which was really useful. And we got on to talking about you know, Zoom calls or video calls at the moment, and you know, we started by saying, hey, how's it going, and everyone goes, yeah, fine, and then you sort of move on really quickly. But actually behind the scenes you can sort of pick up signals that
Yeah.
everything's not all right, you
Mm.
know. So it might be that, you know, somebody is by themselves, or they're in a small space that actually they're used to, that they've lost their liberties to kind of go and do other things, and you can sort of sense it. But because they haven't invited you into the conversation, you feel awkward, and oftentimes these are business relationships. So you've often we've talked about, but you've talked about it quite a lot, about the notion of reaching in instead of expecting people to reach out. So a lot of people say, well, look, if they need me, they'll where I am, reach out to me. But people don't. So how can people reach in
the current situation that we're talking about on Zoom calls and stuff like that? Well, I do think, like, one thing that you have to be aware of is not pressuring, right? So don't make it like it becomes your duty to make sure that you fix this person, because then you're going into fixing territory. Fixing is about you, right? Supporting and reaching in is about creating that space. And sometimes I think that, far from the comment that you said of, where I am, and you even did, for the purpose of people listening, you lifted your arms up in a kind of backing away motion, right? To really kind of show where that, where I am is. Everybody knows what you mean when you say, where I am, right? So creating that space and becoming comfortable in the way that we feel when we create that space. So by that, I mean becoming comfortable with an awkward silence, but knowing that there's a lot to be heard in silence. So if I say to you, like, I hope you don't mind, but I just want to let you know that I've noticed a couple of things, right, on our last few calls, right? And I just want to let you know that genuinely I'm here. And if you feel like it's something that you'd like to talk or share about, then I want to give you that opportunity. And I've purposely left that silence. And when I left that silence, I felt a tingle go up in my body. Fuck, this is awkward, right? It's silent. He's just looking at me, right? And you have to, when you're creating space for someone, you have to listen to that. Because the reason so often that we come in and say, I might go, Has, and I'm creating this space for you, then I start feeling all awkward in that silence. And you as the person I'm trying to create space for might be in your head going, tell him, just tell him, just tell him. And then because I'm too awkward with the silence, I might go, but just know, mate, I think you're quality. All right. So I don't want you to worry. And that's because I'm trying to get the levels back up for me, because I can't deal with that silence. So sometimes it is about, well, not sometimes, nearly all the time, holding space for somebody is about the way you manage and regulate your own emotions so that you can create that space. And that's not easy, because silence can be difficult, and there's so much power to come out of silence, not just in the words and the sounds that come out of it, but in the silence. Does that make sense?
Of course, it makes sense to me. I'm a coach,
Yeah.
so I understand it. But certainly in the beginning of my coaching days, I found it difficult to be with the silence, and people feel awkward with the silence, on the other side, and they sort of just start, and often, if I know it's just momentum that they're trying to just kind of stir up and just get going, I'll slow it back down. But in my coach training, or in our coach training, we learn about 3 different levels of listening, right? Which is the coactive model. Level 1, which is listening to your monologue as a coach, right? So you're like, or as the listener. So that's what you were talking about, I'm getting uncomfortable with the silence, or she should do this, or why doesn't he get it, or and that sort of stuff. So you're like listening to your own voice and then waiting for your moment where you can just share, so you've stopped listening to the other person. Right? Level 2 is where you're really having, like we're having today, like we have on our podcast, is really listening to each other and really being in communication and being there for each other, really truly being in the space. And then level 3, which is more difficult, but it's your environment as well. So it's level 2 plus, so it's your environment around you, picking up resonance, picking up kind of body language. And it's obviously much more difficult when you're in a virtual space, but you can still do it. You can see someone's body language. You can see whether they are giving you eye contact. You can see whether you could just pick these things up. You can pick it up in the resonance. And one of the biggest skills in the work that we do is and it has to be developed even more over time, but it's quite a natural skill, is intuition. So if your intuition is going strong about something, just be courageous and just it's called blurting it out, and you just go, right, here's my intuition. This is what I'm thinking. And if it's wrong, you can move on. You say, oh, okay, cool. Sorry. It's just, it was just something that I was feeling, and you move on, but actually it just opens things up. And then the other thing I find is being in declaration. So almost make a joke for say, it's such a throwaway comment when we say, how you doing? But actually I want to try something different like we did, which is name a word that sums up how you're feeling right now in this moment.
Yeah.
And then it's expansive. The other ways to do it is to definitely not do closed questions. Are you feeling all right? Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Whatever. And opening them out. What's been different for you this week?
Yeah.
Just to open up a conversation.
Yeah, and we spoke about the question that I talk a lot about last week, where I say, rather than asking how you are, say, tell me one thing that you've struggled with this week. And then it's like, whoa, right? You've either got to say, well, I haven't struggled at all, or I've created the opportunity for you to be able to share something a bit different with me. Are you okay? Allows me the space to just say yes or no, doesn't it? So it's those open questions are of huge value as well, right? Like when you learn the importance of them, because again, going back to the training that we know, it helps people the open questions are the ones that make them start to challenge and experience themselves, isn't it? Because you got to go in and think of the answer rather than being allowed to just verbalize something that closes down the conversation.
And for people that may want to talk but can't, that's an opportunity to help them. And that, because if you give like the closed questions, it's like, well, let's move on and let's get to business. And the other thing about the way the setup is at the moment is you organize Zoom meetings for a reason. You don't just kind of have a coffee and just, and I think people are starting to evolve a little bit. I was on a kind of a call with a bunch of founders last week. It was great that actually a lot of people, they were saying that, I'm sort of a bit tired of that organized socializing, and actually now what they've been doing is they might just drop a note at the end of the day and say, anyone fancy a drink? Like, rather than, and then just kind of opening up a bit more. And then there are great organizations and people and leaders that are really working hard to just make sure that, that they are being curious. Yeah. Actually, I'm surprised we haven't used the word curious when we're talking about this topic, because I think that is such an important word. Be curious.
Yeah. I mean, everything should come from curiosity. Probably everything that we've spoken about so far today, right back to when we were talking about why are you unkind? Yeah. When somebody's unkind, rather than just shaming it, get curious about it. Are they just a knob, right? Like you are with fantasy football, or are they being unkind for a reason? Yeah. And I think sometimes even with fantasy football, you're being unkind for a reason, and it's because you're not very good at it, and you have to play with somebody that is good at it. And I think a lot of people resonate with that as well.
I just feel like we are given the impression that we're like really good at fantasy football, and actually you're not very good, and I'm just a little bit better than you. So but I think it's an important. I think just to come back to the serious point for a minute, it's a hard thing to do. You know, we're trained listeners, if you like. We're trained to be curious in a way, and it's hard for a lot of people. So actually, I just think just giving some tips like that to, you know, to have these conversations is really important.
Yeah. And a skill, and it's a skill that everybody can hone in on and become better at, I think. So I've got, because for Mental Health Awareness Week, keeping in line with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, coupled with the fact that we like to have the difficult conversations and tackle the grey areas in between. I got a street cleaner outside. Has has just messaged me. He's laughing at me. I've got a street cleaner outside my window. I can't hear
Right,
him.
literally outside my window, scraping away. So if anyone hears a funny noise that sounds like a rat scratching a floor, that's just someone cleaning the street outside.
Well, I can't hear it. I can't hear it. So I've got a few statements here that I have heard people say. Some of them have been maybe mental health quotes that you may have seen. And I'm going to read them to you, and I'm going to ask you if you agree or disagree with them, and then you're going to tell me why.
Okay.
Okay. So they're statements. The first one: resilience is the ability to cope with everything that life throws at you.
Disagree.
You disagree. Why do you disagree?
Because you've taught me loads about resilience. No, I think that, you know, it sort of it implies that actually you just got to take everything that's thrown at you, and that's what resilience is. And so if you can't, then you don't have resilience. And resilience is about it's way more than that. It's about understanding. It's about being authentic, listening to your voice, understanding what's going on, understanding your triggers, and then, you know, building the right strategies to help you deal with it.
Cool. You know your stuff with resilience, mate.
Well, you know, I learned from the master.
All right.
I'll give you his details one day.
Yeah, so that's my narcissistic tendencies coming out. With the first one is based all around something that I knew you would have learned from me. So the next one actually feeds into a little bit of some of the things that we said. I'm going to go through all of them. I've got 5 or 6 here. It is important to always be kind.
Oh, that sort of messes me up from the beginning. I agree.
You agree that it's important to always be kind?
Yeah.
All right. Have you got anything to elaborate on that, or can I ask you a question about it? I'll ask you a question about it.
Okay.
If I just burgled your house, right, and then you met me the next day, the police arrested me, and for some reason they let you come and meet me, would it be important to be kind to me?
You know, in my head, I know that the virtuous right answer is yes, you should be kind. But the human in me knows that I probably wouldn't be able to be kind.
Okay, but in this instance, you're saying the right thing to do if you were, you know, nobody's a saint. So in that situation, you probably wouldn't be. You think it would be important, you know, you to try and stay kind in the ideal situation.
Yeah.
In that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you're giving me? I'd go with that. I don't think
yeah,
I would be kind.
I would if you can muster it, but like you can't, you know,
You can't.
like, so when I had to years ago when we only had one kid, she was about a year and a half. She was in the back seat of the car, and my partner, she was driving the car, and a drunk driver 5 times over the limit went into the front of the car. Thankfully, we had literally the week before changed to one of the most safe cars, and everyone was fine. I could not have been kind in that moment. Definitely not.
No.
So,
and do you think you should have been?
No.
No,
It,
because I
it
would
was it
agree.
was a drink driver on the wrong side of the road, over 5 times the limit.
Right. And so we could, if we wanted to, right, for the sake of the podcast and what we do with the conversations, we could go down the route of saying, look, this guy might have had terrible problems. You could have looked at his backstory and found some sort of compassion for him, right? Perhaps that would be true, right? And in that moment, one of the consequences of how he was dealing with whatever he was dealing with is that he doesn't deserve in that moment for you to be kind.
Mm.
Agreed?
Yes. So
Good.
so I think, as a default setting, always be kind.
Mm.
There are override buttons. If
Yeah.
you mess with my family,
Don't,
that's a straight override button.
you're not going to be kind. Exactly. And so in some ways, to say it's important to always be kind could actually start to be a little bit toxic, right?
Mm.
Some people have grown up in an environment where they felt like they were only lovable if they were being nice and kind all of the time. And that can be quite toxic, right?
Mm.
I love the Caroline Flack statement, which is if you can't be anything else, be kind. Yeah, that kind of gives you the out for there when in your situation that you spoke about, the car crash, you don't have to be kind, right? So that's a good one. That's the type of conversation I want, right? Here's another one. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything nice at all.
Disagree.
Disagree. Yeah, why do you disagree?
We've talked a lot about it. It's
Yeah.
like, because you always get a lot of crap for jumping up and down on Boris Johnson, and why should you say not only nice things about people that don't deserve it?
Yeah. Okay, what if he's struggling internally? Which is one of the
What?
things that people have said.
Okay,
Leave
yeah.
Boris alone. He's under so much pressure. It's not fair. You're supposed to be in the mental health space, and here you are being not very nice about somebody who's clearly under a lot of pressure. Then should I refrain from being less than nice?
We're sort of overlapping. I think you can. What I mean by that is, I think, don't be unkind.
Yeah.
So say what's on your mind. Say it in a way that communicates what you're feeling, but don't be deliberately unkind.
Yeah.
So you can call somebody out. You can vocalize if you don't think they're doing the right job. Whereas if you're literally just being unkind about a specific situation, then I'd say you're in the wrong.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, I guess that is the perfect answer. Not everything of value is nice, but you don't need to be horrible to make a point.
Right.
But you can't always be nice to make a point, right? Which is kind of the in-between that you just spoke
exactly.
about. Okay, here's another one. It's okay not to be okay. Now, let me just give you a bit of context. I want you to not answer if you think it's okay not to be okay. I want you to answer if you think we're talking Western society here. Let's talk about in the UK. If you think it's okay not to be okay.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Are you asking me if I think that society agrees?
Do you think that society in the UK thinks that it's okay not to be okay?
I don't think society thinks that.
Right. Why not?
Because the judgment. Because that if somebody who is we've talked about this, right? But if is perceived on many levels to be successful, like they've got money, or they've got some sort of kind of perceptions of success or whatever, you think then therefore, well, then they must be okay. But actually, a lot of people have internal dialogues and stories and demons and whatever that they have to deal with, and society doesn't make that okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people say it's okay to not be okay, but what they actually mean is it's okay to have not been okay as long as you're showing that you're all right now. Because we tend still only really to celebrate people that have not been okay rather than allow people not to be okay. And look, if I say to you it's okay not to be okay, and then aggressively try and get you to be okay and say, do this, do yoga, go do this, do that, then actually I clearly don't think it's okay for you to be okay because I want you to be okay.
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm.
So it's one of those terms that's very easy to throw out, but not actually always true. So I'll do one more, and then one more before we move on to reasons to be cheerful. We need to get everyone talking about mental health.
I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
So can you explain? Can you tell me why you agree?
I think that it it has been something that people have had to deal with internally, and oftentimes people don't even understand why they feel the way they do. There's a lot of stigma associated to mental health, and what it means, and so people hide it because they're worried about their jobs, they're worried about their livelihoods and things like that. And then culturally as well, there's that's just like different cultures treat it in different ways. I think the more that you have conversations and normalized that it is normal, right? That you can move away from stigma, and then you can start to address it. So the work that you do is really, it helps people to understand, now I understand why I've always felt this way. Now I understand what's going on. Now I just used to think that I was just a complete arsehole and no one got me. Now I understand all this stuff. So I think and then from there, from understanding, is where you can build. Right? It's not about making somebody better, right? It's about helping you understand where you're at, helping others around you understand where you're at, and create an environment that enables you to just be who you are. So the opposite of just kind of fixing through aggressive, like, let's kind of fix you to be okay. Like, it's just be wherever you are, and then kind of to destigmatize it.
Okay, so to play devil's advocate a little bit, what if I said to you, I've struggled a lot of my life with my emotions. I'm very introverted. I don't know. I love playing the piano and doing a bit of singing, and when I do that, it just works. Just makes me feel better about myself and helps me to release my emotions. But I don't like talking about my emotions with anybody. I like to deal with my stuff internally, and it really does work for me. It really helps me to feel better. But talking about it's not something that's I feel comfortable with. Would you still encourage me to talk about it?
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah. Encouraging is different from pressuring, but also there's a different angle. So it's not pushing or pressuring.
Yeah.
If you say, "Pass, I'm not going there," I'm not going to keep pushing and badgering. But
so you don't think I need to? Because I did use in that instance. So let's use the person I've just talked about. Not would you encourage me to talk? Would you think that I need to talk? Encouragement's different, right? So by introducing that word, to bring it back to the first statement, which was we need to get everyone to talk about mental health. Do you think that person that I've just made up needs to talk about mental health?
Okay. So when you say everyone, I mean I took that to mean the collective.
The collective.
Not every single person.
Okay, yeah.
Because when you say everyone, I just meant the collective, as in society, as in big groups, workforces. If you mean we have to get everyone to talk about mental health, then I disagree, because not everyone wants to, and not everyone.
Okay, and I loved, and I want to conclude what we've just said there. because what happens is, and I know I sound like I'm being a stickler for language here, but we feed this message that we need to get everyone talking about mental health. And when me and you are talking, we mean we need to get society as a collective to make it on the agenda as something that's being talked about. But people take that and they polarize that. And what I've seen a lot of online is people start to almost goad people to talk. I've seen people say things like, why aren't people talking about it? Are they scared? And it's like, well, they might be for a start, right? So people take it, polarize it, and then think that, and I get lots of messages from people reaching out to me saying, I've talked about the importance of mental health and I'm going through this and I'm not talking about it and I feel guilty. And I'm like, well, you don't need to talk about it, right? Because we can't polarize that, right? And which is what I love about what we do. We explore the gray areas and then come to the conclusion that I'm right at the end.
Not about fantasy football. And I'm always right.
I'm joking. Right, and that brings us nicely on, right, to reasons to be cheerful. And do you want to go first, Has? No, because you haven't thought of one yet.
I have. You know, it's funny because we don't talk about what we're going to talk about on the podcast, right?
Right.
And I've actually picked kindness. Reasons to be cheerful is kindness. And actually, it was a friend of mine who I will not embarrass took time out of their week to check in, to reach in with some people that that person knew. A few of them were struggling, and just completely. I know this person well enough to know that it was altruistic. It was giving, and I just thought, you know, in busy lives, in worrying for yourself and your family and all that sort of stuff, to kind of take time out and be really there for the person. I thought that was brilliant. So my reason to be cheerful this week is kindness.
Right. I love that. Brilliant. And my reason to be cheerful is you remember a couple of weeks ago we had the street party here down our street. Well, the lady and her husband that organized it, they came, and like on the day they came up all the road and they were taking pictures of everyone on the house. And then like last week they put this thing, and I meant to bring it in so I could read it, but I've forgotten to do that. But they put this thing through the door which had like a collage on the front of all the pictures of the whole street out on this day, and it was lovely, hot, brilliant day. And they were like, and then on the back it says, it was such a great day. It was so good to be able to meet some people down the street that we've seen loads but never really spoken to, and all this kind of stuff. And it said, you know what, we enjoyed it that much. Let's try and make it a semi-regular thing, right? So our street's like a dead end, so we don't get through traffic. Only come down here if you live down here. And so on I think it's like the 6th of June, a Saturday coming up in June, everyone's going to do it again. We're going to have this street party out there for no other reason than community. And this, on the back of this letter, this couple that live down our street, it said like, and on the end of it, they said, and just to let you know, if anybody needs any shopping done, you know where we're at. If you feel like you want to come and have a social distance cuppa on the garden, you know where we are. And they must have some kind of faith in some religion, because they also said we will pray for you if you feel like that's something that would be useful to you. And I just thought it was so nice. I've got like a love-hate relationship with humans, right? In that I crave connection, but I also get a bit like, just everyone leave me alone. So my wife knows people on the streets, but I'm a bit more keep myself to myself. And it's been really nice to have that community spirit come back down our street. So my reasons to be cheerful is community spirit.
Very nice. Very nice.
Which I think brings us to a nice close. Have you got anything else you want to add on what has been a Mental Health Awareness Week special?
I don't think I do. I think we covered a lot of really good ground. There was some I felt under pressure for a lot of that stuff, but actually it was a really good conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Good, yeah. And I put you under pressure on purpose. That's the way we did it. Anybody that's listening, come and join us on Instagram at 115 miles pod. We put loads of snippets of content out there, and you'll be kept up to date with when stuff comes out. And also, I would encourage everyone to give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to, and maybe leave us a nice little review to help the podcast grow. And we'll leave it there.
See ya.